Derek lay inside the dense antiseptic air of the hospital, fluorescent lights bleaching the corners and stretching every thought into thin ribbons of fear, while the last memory of the steep grade, the chain skimming the frame, and the wind beating his chest as he dropped down the hill dissolved into the metronome of heart monitors and the rasp of metal gurney wheels along the corridor. And in the middle of that sterile rustle stood the nail-hard truth that this latest push past his limits had left his body suspended between motion and numbness, between return and captivity, a fine line to be decided by the scalpel, by time, and by the chance no one dared name. Ashley knew all of it the way a person who has loved, hoped, and been disappointed is forced to know, through frantic text fragments, a doctor's leveled voice, and a mother's hand pressing her shoulder with the weight of a lifelong catechism that stability is the guiding light and any disturbance must be subdued by the discipline of a tidy home. And under that relentless whisper Ashley ended things with Derek just before his world tilted for good, a decision more self-defense than coldness, a move to dodge the unsafe spiral she had been taught to avoid from the start. The irony was that the moment Derek chose to ride was also the moment Ashley admitted cracks in her resolve, when she set what her mother called steadiness beside the raw aliveness Andre stirred, the kind that sent blood running quick at the wrist whenever his eyes paused on her and slid away toward Danny in a way that blew apart her carefully ordered values. And for a split second Ashley believed that pulling back from Derek was the same as saving herself. No one predicted that her only mooring line would snap the instant she let go, and when the urgent surgery call sounded the cruelest detail was that she was no longer the person authorized to sign, no longer the one to speak as next of kin, just a guilty silhouette standing at a theater door while every theory of safety fell like dry leaves. Somewhere else in the same map, Andre folded into his own contradiction, drawn to what Ashley meant yet dragged toward Danny by a gravity made of history, power, and unspoken debt, the invisible wiring of a gated club, of long dinners laced with promises and handshakes that meant more than they said, leaving him wanting the simple life beside the woman who made him think of decency while a colder truth reminded him that Danny was the doorway into the power core he had worked for. When the news of Derek's crash flashed through the social lattice like a spark, Andre ran to the hospital and met a look from Ashley sharp as a blade, a look holding accusation and self-protection at once, and he had no words thick enough to cross that border because anything he said would sound like design, and Ashley, with her moral framework sanded raw by mixed signals, no longer believed in gentle versions of truth. She trusted what her eyes had seen. Danny's hand on Andre's in a private moment that shattered every binding, and in her mind that image sealed a vote of no confidence in both of them and pushed her back to her mother's old platform, stay with the steady man, build a house on ground that does not give. But was Derek still ground or had he become a fractured surface, and if it was broken, was it accident, recklessness, or the touch of another hand? The hospital kept its standards, a preliminary report naming a loss of control in a tight curve, a front brake overheated after a long descent, a mixture of technique failure and too much confidence. And then near the ambulance bay a maintenance worker murmured about a hairfine score on the brake line, and that leak raced from inbox to the people who could use it, turning misfortune into a schematic of suspicion. Ashley heard the rumor third hand with nothing firm to hold because everything she touched those days felt like foam except her mother's hand, firm as a gate that pushed her toward what was presented as the only right choice, give Derek what he had deserved from the start, a home, a commitment, a vow through adversity, because only that could keep them both from a whirl of judgment and only that could stop her sliding downhill toward Andre, and the decision was dressed as a rite of penance, a way to turn private guilt into shared loyalty, and Ashley let herself float like a swimmer clutching a cold log, not knowing that each centimeter downriver moved her deeper into her mother's architecture where marriage was always a strategic piece. From a required distance Andre kept watching, coming, and going at the hospital without finding a way to reach Ashley that did not widen the wound she was trying to close, while Danny stood at the line like a symbol of the whole contradiction. At once the collaborator in long-range plans for funds and projects no one else could see and also the single name that made Ashley's heart slam shut, though Danny never asked Andre to break anything. Her very place at the center of an index card full of plans was enough evidence in Ashley's private court where feeling and ethic twist like twin vines. When the idea of an unexpected wedding began to coalesce it came with no music or white flowers, no blue sky or staged drizzle, only a scentless room and paperwork, a wheelchair like an omen, and a list of unsolved questions in which the largest was not whether Derek would walk but whether Ashley could walk the long road of a choice built on guilt without eroding herself. The women in her family spoke of duty, of the strength of standing beside the weakened, of the dignity of staying, and Ashley found herself interpreting those words personally while her mother used them as barricades against outside shocks, and between them lay Derek in the fog, not an emblem, not a moral project, only a person facing something that might take the rest of his future. Yet when he was lucid his eyes flashed with the same drive he had on nights he pitched expansions for the club. The look of a man who pushes forward and seldom agrees to be led, that lit a second suspicion like ink seeping through paper. If Derek had not caused the crash, had he used it as a shield, as a chance to reorder loyalties, to pull Ashley back into orbit with the gravity of pity? Small signs dotted the days. Stories he allowed to circulate about a comeback with a woman who loved him regardless, old photos revived by a media handler right on cue, thanks sent to donors that doubled as reminders he needed a wife's public face, and together they made another piece of the game Ashley only recognized once she had sunk deep. So when the date was set in a hurry for a tidy bedside ceremony, most people called it a beautiful act of fidelity and Ashley called it, inside, an act of repair, a reset of order, an apology in a frame. Andre heard and stood before a door he was not invited to cross and chose not to break the ritual, not because he lacked desire but because he knew a last-minute protest would tear Ashley into two halves and he refused to cause another rip, yet at the edge of the hall Danny passed him an envelope. A call logged to a bike service made from Derek's phone days before the crash, a short appointment with a mechanic not affiliated with the club's approved vendors, and a note about switching to a lighter brake cable model advertised in a closed group, breadcrumbs suggesting that someone had touched the bike at the right moment. It proved nothing, but it opened a new path for truth, and Andre knew he could not use it to halt a wedding, only to keep Ashley from being locked forever into a single story of penance. The ceremony moved with solemn, fog-like quiet, each guest substituting a private narrative for any real blessing. Ashley's mother stood like a mast, her face refusing to mark weakness, and Derek, half his body still, clasped Ashley's hand as if cementing a new pillar, while Ashley, her eyes far away, stepped into vows while simultaneously standing at a cliff edge, each phrase a paving stone on a bridge across a ravine, solid slabs with uncertain anchors ahead. Afterward their small world of gates, guardhouses, and glittering fundraisers instantly reseated the players, naming Ashley the woman of the new season, Derek an inspiration, Andre the man outside who must bear the cost of hesitancy, and Danny a convenient mystery to label every lapse in judgment, and then night fell and the labels slid off like decals in rain, leaving 4 people under 4 separate skies. Ashley began the schedule of a caregiver, learned to push the chair, read scans, memorize rehab charts that asked more than a contrite heart can carry, and inside that rhythm she touched a hard truth. Kindness does not automatically become love, duty does not thaw a chill by itself, staying sometimes needs more than a decision, it needs the consent of every cell. And as she felt that distance she also sensed Derek shifting, not downward but toward calculation, sharper in the way he staged their public story and fundraising rounds he insisted on attending, and each time she felt herself turned into a prop, a living exhibit of fidelity wheeled out for display, a sting of quiet resistance growing under her ribs. Meanwhile Andre kept pulling the thread he had found: the off-platform mechanic, the posts in the private cycling group, and a chain of chatter between serious writers and an anonymous account devoted to downhill brake optimizations, and in that traffic he reached another hedge-enclosed corner of the community where investment decisions and staffing judgments leak into hobbies, and Derek's name surfaced not as a victim but as a contender for a key seat on a sports fund board, exactly the sort of thing to annoy men who prefer to work behind the curtain. The more Andre assembled, the more the crash looked like an intersection of rivalry, ego, and ambition, the kind of crossroads that invites small traps, and there he met a discomforting idea: whoever lit the match, Derek was the quickest to use the flame, turning misfortune into a communal motor and his new wife into a statue of sacrifice by the door. Danny, who knows the bylaws of power, reminded Andre that truth has value only when the person who needs it is ready to look, and with Ashley timing would decide everything. As Derek's regimen steadied, doctors spoke of partial recovery, of living independently with the right support, and Derek used that like a speech for a stronger return, drawing applause and positive press, while Ashley was asked to tell her journey as a profile, and each time she saw the discomfort in her own eyes bounce off the lens because her story was not a profile, it was a wound knitting, and the narrative kept demanding that she open it and recite it in the approved cadence of inspiration. An industrialized atonement whose standardization made her choke, because public repair is not the same as private repair, and in the standardization she recognized another truth about Derek: he refused anything labeled pity, demanded respect, unconditional love, and a strategic partnership. If she stayed she would have to love not only the man in the hospital but the road he was paving. Eventually Andre found a small lever to pry the curtain an inch farther. A traffic camera at the stretched Derek Road that morning captured a van stopping where it should not, matching the hour Derek often checked tire pressure at a small shop, and a man stepping out toward the bike area for a few minutes before vanishing. The image was smudged but provocative, and when Andre shared it with Danny they agreed there is no rule guaranteeing justice will be a straight line, Only the responsibility to bring the peace to the right person, Ashley, not to implode the life she was propping up, but to return her the right to choose with a fuller set of facts. Andre asked to meet where she could breathe, away from wards and podiums, in a quiet park, and placed a thumb drive in her hand like a small stone, and Ashley took it with fear and relief at once, because even after crafting an entire story she still longed for a reagent to tell whether she was living in idea or reality. She watched without tears, then messaged her mother to pause some obligations and told Derek she needed a few days at the place outside town to sort paperwork. And in that retreat she did not look for Andre or Danny, she looked for herself, walked under tall trees, listened to leaves, and wondered whether love can begin again from a stripped-down point, whether she could love Derek if truth said he was not only a victim but the most skillful player, whether she could love Andre if truth said he lacked the courage to stand when she needed him, and whether she could live a life where the only person she answers to is herself. When she returned she did not break everything, did not throw the ring or stage a storm. She laid a few ordered questions on the table between them about the van, the brake appointment, the mechanic, the lighter cable in the very week of the long descent, and Derek, instead of anger, chose a practiced calm, speaking with the poise of a man trained not to be cornered. Every writer optimizes equipment. A friend recommended the part. Failure is part of the game. The video is blurry and speculation useless, and as he spoke Ashley saw a version of Derek she had never named, someone far too used to steering the story to notice the wider picture, asking for a softer, truer note. And she understood that the marriage could continue only if both of them sat down with raw honesty, something Derek was not ready to do. The story does not end with a narration but with small decisions. Ashley cuts back her public appearances, centers her job and her own therapy, gives herself permission to say out loud that she feels trapped, that the urge to be right turned into cuffs, that her mother's wall and Andre's open door coexist inside her. Andre proves by deed that he can put Ashley first, routing new fragments through her lawyer so she controls their use, not showing up everywhere she is, and recasting his tie to Danny into a clean professional line. Because he knows no road lasts if it begins in gray, Danny, after all this, returns to the projects that need her and lets go, accepting that not every win is measured from the center, and Derek, with Ashley stepping off his public stage, is forced to meet himself in rehab rooms where the therapist does not care about narratives, only about force, angles, and repetitions. And somewhere in that dry counting he sees the jagged edge where he turned the crash into a campaign and used love like an insurance policy, and if he hopes to keep Ashley he will have to dismantle those policies, learn apology without a script, and tolerate a story he does not control. At Fairmont Crest the whispers continue, the parties pour, the groundskeepers sweep the gold leaves, and beneath the gloss a quiet shift takes hold. A woman named Ashley learning to reclaim choice beyond guilt, a man named Derek learning to sit inside his fragility without weaponizing it, a man named Andre growing up by not clinging, and a woman named Danny accepting that some victories are counted by stepping back so things can be healthier. Whether Derek's accident was a plot may never receive an absolute answer like most mysteries here, but a more important truth remains, whether that marriage continues as a sentence or can be redefined as an agreement between two adults, and that now belongs to them. And the hardest work, as usual, does not live under lights or praise but in very ordinary mornings when Ashley pours water, Derek looks through a window, and both decide to say what they fear and drop the roles long fused to their skin to see whether, on the far side of candor, anything worth keeping still waits.